My name is Danny Krug with FCP Euro, and today I'm going to be showing you the engine PCV overhaul on the M272 V6 and M273 V8. When discussing the Mercedes M272 V6 or M273 V8 engine family, one of the bigger repairs that you're going to want to keep an eye on is going to be the intake manifold, as it's a pretty pricey fix. However, these parts right in front of me here today are a pretty inexpensive way to make sure you're prolonging the life of that intake manifold and potentially keeping a very expensive repair at bay. So these parts right in front of me here today are going to be pretty much the entirety of the PCV system on both the M273 V8 and the M272 V6 engine family, kind of regardless of trim, size, or options package. And they're all going to be the same regardless of your displacement. We have a high load and a low load portion of this breather system. There's a low load portion that's going to be responsible for just general crankcase ventilation, and then there's a high load which will be your wide open throttle ventilation, and both of those duct back to the throttle body. Now, when one of these portions of the PCV system fails, what will end up happening is you'll get excess oil venting through the PCV system and directly into your throttle body. As this happens over a sustained period and kind of oil, gunk, and residue starts to go past the throttle body and into your intake manifold, eventually the inner components of the intake manifold are going to get gunked up and gritty. This is a huge issue on the M272 and the M273 because they use vacuum actuated intake runner flaps to manipulate airflow. And when these flaps fail on the intake manifold, you're going to get a check engine light and a bunch of fault codes. The best way that we can prolong the life of the flaps maintaining their proper function is going to be to keep as much oil from going into that intake manifold as possible, which will also mean taking care of your PCV breather system. If you've just done an intake manifold, I would definitely still recommend sticking around and making sure you get this done if you haven't already, so you can prolong your new intake manifold's life and not have to encounter that one again in half of the maintenance interval that you would generally have on an intake manifold. So for tools today, we have an electric ratchet. This is not mandatory, but it is definitely helpful. We have a selection of 3/8 and quarter drive ratchets as well. We do have a couple of short extensions, an E10 socket or two of varying lengths. I also have an E10 ratcheting wrench right here, super helpful as well. A couple flathead screwdrivers, one longer one shorter one. A pick. I have a magnet on a stick here, just in case we drop any bolts because we're working at the back of the engine. I also do have some Loctite. We're going to be using a little bit of that, some brake clean to clean up a mess. A flashlight, of course, because we're working in close proximity to the firewall. Lastly, I don't have it in front of me here, but a mirror on a stick or something of that sort may be very helpful, as again, we're going to be working in pretty tight spaces, and that can help you to see inside of some of the little nooks that you may not be able to otherwise. All right, so we are over here with our M272 V6, and again, regardless of the chassis that you have behind your engine or whether it's a 272 or a 273, this is going to apply to you. So we're going to start by taking off the intake pipes, the front engine cover, and the rear engine cover. Just going to pull the front cover first, put it off to the side, pinch the secondary air pump hose, which will allow you to pull it straight off. Then we're going to twist these guys out of the way. If yours look as weathered as mine do, they're not going to fight you very much. All right. And then the engine cover itself, we will just lift off of the clips, and then the mass airflow sensor at the back. All right. When we're talking crankcase ventilation system on either of these engines, let's first talk about the high load, and then we'll move over to the low load. So the high load system is responsible for your wide open throttle ventilation, and that is going to be at the rear of the passenger side cylinder head. Point to it right back here. This is the oil drip tray. It's a black plastic cover. We'll show you in more detail in a second here. This is going to actually vent directly to your throttle body by a large diameter hose. You can kind of see that lurking back here. On the inside of the oil drip tray is the oil drip pan. Now that's going to be responsible for directing all of the oil vapors that are going on inside of the crankcase, and that bolts directly onto the back of the camshaft. So we're going to be doing that today, but we're also going to be doing the low load side of the system, and that is going to be on the front of the driver's side cylinder head. So that guy is right up over here. A lot easier to get to generally. However, it does have a vent line that goes into the top of the throttle body, so it's going to go all the way around underneath and into the top, which means we are going to need to remove a few more parts to get it out and replace it with our new hose and our new system. So we are working with the high load portion first, and our first course of action here is going to be just to pinch this hose off of the high load and then pull it directly forward. Now we do have a new one of these hoses All right, there it goes. So we do have a new one of these hoses in the kit for you in the PCV overhaul. This one was just done for the intake manifold service that you'll also find on our channel. So we're not going to replace it today, but only difference for you if you were trying to replace this as a part of your service, it is going to have a clamp onto the air deflector over by the throttle body. You'll just chop that, slide the new one on, and then put on either a worm clamp or ideally a proper hose clamp to lock it on. In this instance, because this one's brand new, it just kind of slides on and it'll hold. So we've got this off. Going to just tuck it out of the way. Again, we will be reusing this one, so we don't need to take off the air deflector or anything crazy. But we now have 4 E10 bolts that are going to be holding on the drip tray. Just for the sake of showing you right here, if you're imagining it on the back of the engine, it'll be like this, but spinning it around, if this is the back of the engine, you'll have one up top, another one. This one's directly underneath the nozzle, and then there's a last one. This can be a bit of a pain down here. Now that I have those all broken loose, I'm going to unthread them. I'm also going to place a rag underneath the drip tray itself, because when you pop this out, it will usually puke a little bit of oil, and that's directly above your catalytic converter, so if you can keep it from hitting that, you'll have a much less stinky startup. So I'm going to unthread these by hand, stick a rag underneath, and we'll pop it off. All right. These will be our 4 eTorx bolts. Now the centrifuge will just pop off. It does have a nylon seal that locks onto the drip pan itself. So you might feel a little bit of resistance, but you can usually just pop, maybe pry a little bit, and it'll come right off. There it goes. All right, so in front of me here we have the old oil drip tray that just came off of the car. Now you've heard me talking a lot about oil entering into the throttle body and then into the intake manifold, which fouls it. This is where that's generally going to happen on the high load portion of the PCV. A lot of the time, a sign that this is starting to fail, you'll have the oil running down the back of the cylinder head, you'll smell oil, and yes, that means that this outer perimeter seal is starting to fail and oil is dripping down the back of the engine and hitting the cats. However, something you definitely need to be looking out for when you're doing this service is the diameter of the nylon seal in the middle. Now this looks pretty uniform here and isn't an immediate cause for concern. However, when I hold it up against our brand new one, look at the difference in diameter of that seal. So what is happening here, the centrifuge, which sits in the center of this where it seals, maybe over time, just mileage because it is on the back of the camshaft may gain a little bit of a wobble or even just erode the seal over time. And as this starts to kind of get compromised, what you'll have is even more oil and oil vapor venting into the throttle body than you would normally have just in normal operation. So suddenly this will become something more like liquid oil rather than just vapor. That's when you're usually going to do a good deal of intake manifold damage. There's still a fair amount of that comes from the low load side, which we'll be tackling in a minute, but this is a really good indicator. If you take this off to do reseal of the perimeter seal, and then find that this one has a giant diameter, you really should go ahead and replace the drip pan as well. All right, so there is only a single E10 bolt that is actually holding the centrifuge onto the camshaft itself. This is a reverse thread bolt, which means to tighten it, you're going to be going counterclockwise, but that's later. Right now, to loosen it, we are going clockwise. So I'm going to put this on here, and I'm going to be pulling it towards me. The reason I'm driving that home, of course, is this is a relatively fragile bolt, and if you break it off, you're going to have to take off the cylinder head cover and do a whole bunch of reconnaissance that you won't have to do if you just get it right the first time. All right, so I have the bolt stuck through the new centrifuge here. I'm going to kind of tuck this in the back of the engine, and then I will be, again, counterclockwise to tighten this guy up. This is 6 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. That's a very small torque spec. Our centrifuge is now on. Our next step is going to be reinstalling the drip tray. This will slide directly over the nose on that drip pan. There is an alignment dowel on the bottom right corner of the engine cylinder head. You'll have these alignment pins on the drip tray, which will help you to kind of get that pressed on so that you can then tighten the bolts without needing to counter hold. Boom. All right, so that is now clipped into place. I will grab our new hardware and then I will come back in here. Those are also going to be 6 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. All right, we have those threaded in by hand. I am now going to do the 6 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. 6 Newton meters is barely even hand tight, so definitely just snug it up and leave it be. Though I do recommend using a 1/4 inch torque wrench. Now I'm going to tuck the PCV hose, and I'm just going to slide it directly onto the PCV hose, just aiming to get it flush with this little rectangle that'll be right at the end of the drip tray. That will tell you that this is fully seated. So we are now moving on to the low load portion of the PCV, which is right atop the cylinder head here. I'm going to show you two ways to do this, the full way and the shortened way. So the shortened way is going to be, maybe you're not choosing to replace the entire vacuum line that goes into the throttle body, the vent line. Maybe yours is in good condition or you're just not worried about it. Then we will just show you how to do the PCV alone. So that is right up top here. It's again going to be a series of E10 bolts. Right, and there's one all the way down at the bottom. You will find it, because if you do not, you will find that this won't come off anyways. So then I'm going to move this big old vacuum line out of the way. Just by unclipping it from the PCV bracket, it'll then pop off of this wiring harness protection loom right here. And then I'm just going to keep loosening up these E10s. I'm actually going to grab an electric ratchet and zip them off really quick. So those are the only 3 bolts that are holding on the driver's side, the low load PCV. The last thing that'll be holding it on there is the portion of the vent hose that connects to like the little nozzle or nipple coming off at the top. I am going to take a pick and just free up around the perimeter of that. It'll make it a lot easier to pop off. So I have that mostly loosened up. Now I should just be able to grab the PCV since we took the screws out. It'll take a little bit of convincing, but it'll pop right off of the cylinder head. And then because we loosened up the hose, I can just kind of pinch and wiggle. Boom. All right, so this is the old PCV right here. You can kind of see how it's venting from the engine itself. The seal around here is pretty much fine. However, internally it could have very easily failed. We had a ton of oil in the intake manifold when we did it on this car, so definitely makes sense to replace both portions of the PCV system rather than just doing one, especially since this one is going to be your general around town and casual driving. For the sake of keeping everything clean, of course, we do have an open port on the engine right now. We are going to be doing the hose in just a minute, but I want to get this new PCV bolted directly on as soon as possible. So that is the low load PCV done. However, this car, as we mentioned, everything seems to be pretty much original. We are also going to do the vent line from this guy into the top of the throttle body. That is a little bit more involved. There's a lot of stuff on top of it, so we're going to start just peeling back the layers one by one. I'm actually going to start by unclipping the passenger side port for the engine control unit. You just pull it outwards, and as you do that, the cable itself will disconnect itself from the ECU. Will take a little bit of force, don't go too crazy. There we go. So you could hear that kind of whoosh as it disconnected. Now I can just pull it out and away. And then the engine control unit itself will just lift off of these brackets on top of the intake manifold. And there is a metal clip that will be holding the engine harness onto the fuel rail, as well as these 2 connectors right here. So you're going to unplug both of these, and then I recommend taking a flathead or something like that to pop the clip off of the fuel rail. It's going to make things a lot easier. Engine harness is mostly free. There is one last clip that's holding the harness at the back of the driver's side of the engine. All right, now that we have this guy loose from the fuel rail, the only thing holding the engine computer in this realm is going to be this metal clip right by the engine bracket over here. So I'm just going to kind of wiggle this in and out of the way, and then we can tuck the engine control unit out of the way. So that gives us a lot of space to work with. As you can kind of see a bit clearer now, we have our vent line that goes from the top of the throttle body over here. It snakes underneath this bracket, then snakes underneath the map sensor, and then into our new PCV. So a good step 1 here is going to be to grab a T30, loosen up these 2 bolts, then we can pull this upwards and we can access our line. Right, then the bracket will actually lift directly up. However, you will notice it is actually clipped onto the vent line itself. There's a little plastic clip. That can also be very fragile, so I urge you to be gentle with that. First, to make a little bit less tension on the vacuum line itself, I'm going to separate this harder vacuum line from the rubber PCV line. So again, I'll take a pick to loosen it up so it doesn't fight me too much. Go around the perimeter. All right, and that should, if it cooperates, just slide on out. Perfect. So that'll give us a little bit more room to play with here. And then you can see, just going to gently, and this is very, very brittle from age, pull it apart and unclip. All right. We now have a good portion of this revealed. However, the port where it actually sticks into the throttle body, we still can't see. So we're now going to work to get the mass airflow sensor out of the back of the engine compartment, because that'll give us a little bit more access. Step one, grab a flathead. There is a gray tab on the back of the connector for it. Going to just stick my screwdriver and separate. You will hear it click open when that locking tab is separated. There it goes. All right, and then I can squeeze and coax it directly off the MAF. Now, the MAF itself, again, an area where it could be very brittle. These two clips that hold it onto the back of the intake manifold, you're going to need to sort of spread them apart and separate them where it locks on. These may break. It's not the end of the world if they do. However, if we can keep from doing that, of course we will. So now that we have the MAF out of here, we are going to be able to just pull the vacuum line for the PCV out. For reference, this is our new one. This is kind of what things are looking like in here. So you do have this little plastic portion that goes down into the throttle body. It just pulls straight up. That's all. As you can see, this one's really nasty in comparison to our new one. So that is out. Then what we can proceed to do is go back to our PCV up front that we just replaced, and we can sort of, again, take a pick, loosen it up, and then actually pull it directly out so we don't have to fully undo this harness. We might be able to snake the new one underneath. We'll see if this one has enough play in it. If not, we can just unbolt a couple of things and we can just lift things up. It'll be easy. So that is our old hose. We'll just snake it out, completely removed. Nasty. As you can see, this one is dry, it is cracking, it is dirty. So this is trash. We do have our new PCV on, so we'll just run the new line and it'll be good. All right, so we're going to try and start on this side. So generally, you will have to loosen this E10 here, take it out. You may also have to loosen the second one for this bracket, which is right back over here. And once you do that, you should be able to lift this plastic up just enough to snake it underneath. So I am gonna just take the MAP sensor off, just so we're not pulling on anything crazy. So there's two tabs here. You just pull away. There we go. So now we have a little bit more slack in this. All right, so first E10 right up here. So now for reference, we will still have all these connected up front, but look at how much more space I can get out of this guy. Should be more than enough to just tuck it and push directly onto our PCV. All right, so as you can see, we now have that flush on here. So that'll be the front portion of the hose taken care of. We now have a little bit of routing to do. Of course, we're going underneath this bracket because this clips onto here. So now that we've gone over the fuel rail in the back, this guy just slides directly on, press down, get it flush with the throttle body as we have here. That is all set. All right, so I'm going to just lift this bracket out of the way a bit. The reason being, we do have one more port that we need to hook up to for the vent line. Pull the yellow tab out. Then this guy just slides directly on. All right, so we have that pressed flush. That is all set. Now I'm just going to clip directly onto this union right here, as that is its intended purpose. All right, and then this guy clicks in, so that is all good. Next, we have a pair of E10 bolts, one here and one here to tighten this loom protector back down. So I'm going to do those. Those are 8 Newton meters or snug. All right, so those are snug. We do have the MAP sensor here, which you may remember we unseated from its housing. I'm just going to clip that back in, so that is all good. We do have the hard line as well for the PCV that I unclipped from the two connectors up here, and then it also tucks onto our new PCV right there. Those are all set. So now the PCV is completely sealed back up, which is good news. We can reinstall our engine mount bracket right over here. And those are the two T30s. Those are also going to be 8 Newton meters if you have torqued in your intake manifold before. If you have a brand new intake manifold and you're doing this right now, these will likely not have threads in them. That is because you have to cut your own threads. That'll be 9 Newton meters. So yeah, we're going to take our mass airflow sensor. We're just going to pop it back onto the air intake boot or the air deflector, whatever you'd like to call it. Make sure we get the O-ring to seal. It can be a bit of a fight, especially if you took it off the way I did when I was pulling it out. Now that we have everything squared away here, we can take our engine harness as well as our ECU and start flipping it back into place. I'm going to recommend you do the bottom connector first. Just clip it in, you'll hear a click when it is fully seated. All right, there it is. Then we can do our bracket that goes onto the fuel rail. Just push it down. All right, then we have this plug up front. That was a much quieter one, but it also clicked into place. We can flip our ECU down, press down on it so it seats into the bushings. And this guy is going to be the exact opposite of how it went on, which is it's not going to look like it's seating fully. What you are then going to do is push it in towards yourself and it'll pull it on and connect. You heard that click, that means it's locked into place. Although of course we can lift it off these bushings. All right, so we're going to put the engine cover back on. First, the one plug back here, the mass airflow sensor. If you still have that unplugged, go ahead and clip that in. You'll hear it clip, and then you can push down on the gray tab to lock it. And then also, just to keep things tidy, the harness for the engine control unit you can tuck back into this metal bracket that it has. It's going to go right underneath. Now we can put our air filter housing back on. Just put my hand at the back to make sure it's sealing properly as I push it down onto the mass airflow sensor. Yep, there it goes. All right, so we have a clean seal around there. There's no leaks. This guy's clipped into place. We'll put on the front cover and the hoses and then give it our first start. So that is going to conclude what I think is one of the most important services that you can do on your M272 V6 or your M273 V8 Mercedes-Benz. It's super inexpensive. It's really not that hard to do. It will take a little bit of fiddling, as you saw, but not very difficult. Just dedicate a couple hours and it will ensure that you are protecting the longevity of your intake manifold in your vehicle. If you are coming to this video just after doing your intake manifold, I do urge you to do this now. It's going to prolong the life of that new one. Make sure you get a long and enduring ownership experience out of your new manifold that you just put all of that effort into replacing. So if you want to let us know how it went, feel free to hop in the comments, let us know. Also, like and subscribe because we have a lot more content just like this coming your way for both Mercedes-Benz and a host of other European vehicles.